Will say all he does now is go on and tell those old stories we've all heard before, with his usual laboratory gags and his camp leather. Pathetic.
He felt he was excavating himself in those chat shows, just giving more chunks of himself away. And I think he felt there wasn't much left of himself.
He'd say, oh, I long to be dead. He said, I've had enough of this world. He said, the pain, the agony, I can't stand it anymore, you know. And I said, well, don't talk so silly. I said, what about all your friends? And they said, well, yes, I'll miss them. But he said, you don't understand, mate. He said, the pain is really crippling me.
Williams' diaries record he had mused on suicide from his earliest days. But in the last few months of his life, the idea of putting an end to his suffering began to obsess him.
What, you mean, like, say, you'd want to kill yourself or something like that?
Oh, yes, I put stuff like down about suicide and how one would go about it, what would be the best method, and all that kind of thing, you know. Looking back on it, of course, it's often, you know, quite amusing.
Why do you think you want to kill yourself?
Well, one would think it at the time because of extremely low state of morale. And one actually does write something down which is practical in terms of how one thinks one should go about it.
Counted my capsules of poison, and I've got over 30, so there should be enough to kill me. Just have to work out the time and the place.
A fortnight before he died, I saw him outside Broadcasting House, and we stood on a traffic island. He was very distressed, and he looked sort of grey, and Kenneth's face in repose sometimes was an incredibly tragic face, and he would go very sallow, and I remember thinking, I was so preoccupied with my own things, and I remember thinking, oh, I should ring him, but I didn't.
On March 21st, 1988, Williams' diaries reveal that he attempted an overdose, but after taking 2 barbiturates, couldn't go through with it. On April 14th, he wrote what was to be his final entry in his diary.
Had meal with Lou at 5:30. Saw the news, watched the dreary saga of murder and mayhem. By 6:30, pain in the back was pulsating as it's never done before. So this, plus the stomach trouble, combines to torture me. Oh, what's the bloody point?
The next day, Louis went into her son's flat and found him dead in his bed.
The comedy actor Kenneth Williams has died at the age of 62. He was found dead at his flat in North London this morning.
He died from an overdose of barbiturates, causing much speculation in the press. But the coroner couldn't be sure it wasn't an accident and recorded an open verdict.
It was, if you like, I think a generous verdict. Probably there was doubt in their minds and they just went for the verdict that was the most neutral. It's possible when you've taken a lot of alcohol that you take a lot of pills, I suppose, by mistake. This has happened, but I'm sure it didn't happen to him. This was a perfectly willed act, which he'd contemplated several times at different stages over the weeks beforehand.
I believe that he took his life. That is what I believe. I don't know that for sure, but I believe so. He could not find anything worthy in himself at all. He felt that his life was dross.
At the end of the day, he died, I think, of frustration, really. Sexual, social, theatrical, professional. He just wasn't doing what he wanted to do.
Left neatly stacked in Williams' bookcase was his final legacy. The 41 volumes that documented his innermost thoughts about himself and everyone who came into his orbit, candid and uncensored.
You say you're not going to want them published after your death. I'm surprised to hear you say that. I'd have thought you might have thought you'd want your diaries published after your death.
Oh, I see. Oh, after death?
Yes.
Oh, I beg your pardon. I thought you meant published during lifetime.
Oh, no.
Oh, after death, yes. One wouldn't mind that at all.
Wouldn't you worry about being unkind or catty?
No, I wouldn't care at all then. Molly, out your way. I wouldn't mind it. And then saying, oh, well, he was a rotter, to say a nasty thing like that. I wouldn't mind at all if I was out of the way. That's fine.
He knew that he'd been a strange and somewhat dislocated personality all his life. Since a child he'd known that, and he'd never managed quite to puzzle it out for himself. But I think he wanted to leave the evidence so that it was there on the table, literally on the table, for us to see and sort out.
la vie, ma Krebsesel.
I feel sad for him that his life wasn't as happy for him as he made it for all of us. Because as soon as you saw him, as soon as you heard him, your heart lifted, you broke into a smile, and sometimes into a belly laugh. He had the gift of creating laughter, but he didn't have the gift of creating it for himself.
Lingerie et de toilette, gauloise cigarette, entourage ma
Bye-bye, and thank you ever so much. It's been really wonderful for you to have me.
The Simpsons are taking over.
Is Al there? Al? Yeah, Al. Last name, Alcoholic?
Phone call for Al. Alcoholic. Homosexual? My crotch.
Simpsons Night, tomorrow from 6 on BBC Two.
First take the Brzezinski serve and the Agassi forehand. Leighton Hewitt's backhand and definitely Henman's volleys. Athleticism, rafter. Temperament, there's only one guy. And of course in every champion there's that little bit of magic.
Wimbledon champions aren't made, they're born. Live coverage only on the BBC.
Newsnight, BBC Two with Kirsty Walk.
I said to her that I wasn't happy at all with her general attitude towards Peter, and that I felt that she was unnecessarily cold and brutal towards him.
Tonight on Newsnight, the first insight into the personality and treatment methods of the nurse who's under investigation over the deaths of 18 children. Good evening. The deaths of 9 boys and 9 girls aged between 8 months and 17 years are being investigated by police. A nurse who worked for this hospital trust has been suspended amid suggestions that terminally ill children were given very large doses of painkillers. A mother whose son, now 4 years old, was treated by the nurse, talks exclusively to Newsnight. Also tonight, nicknamed Robocop and famous for his so-called zero-tolerance crime policy, the senior detective cleared of criminal conduct but still under a cloud, Ray Mallon tells us why he's convinced the police will have to give him his job back. The nurse at the centre of the allegations about the deaths of 18 children is, according to a relative of hers, devastated. She cannot be named for legal reasons but has offered to help with the inquiry. Police say their investigation is at an early stage and could end in charges or in no action. The nurse worked at the Southend Mental Health and Community Care NHS Trust. The families involved learned of the investigation only yesterday. The incident will revive horrific memories for parents whose children died at the hands of another nurse, Beverly Allett. She was convicted in 1991 of killing 4 children and injuring 9 others in her care when she was working within a hospital. The current allegations involve a nurse in the community. And once again, the NHS is at the centre of a storm. Here's our health correspondent, Matthew Hill.
Until today's revelations in The Sun, at least 18 families may have taken comfort from the thought that their terminally ill children had died in their own time at home. But now, with reports of a police investigation into allegations that lethal overdoses of painkillers were administered by a nurse in Southend, bitter memories will be dredged up again. Police, at a media conference today, said it was too early to say anything about the nature of the allegations against the nurse. They refused to identify the woman, who's understood to be in her 40s. Their investigation has lasted 7 months, but they were forced to rush round, notifying families so they didn't find out first from papers.
The Sun's allegations, to me, are not for me to comment on at this stage. It surrounds clearly the care of patients, and I wouldn't want people to go away from this event with the wrong idea. We are concerned with the care of those patients. I've got to rely on experts to assist me in understanding exactly what went on, and I can't give you any indication now.
A relative of the nurse has today told the BBC the story has been blown out of all proportion, and that her relative has told the police that she's willing to cooperate with their investigation. She lived and worked in the South End area. Her job was to visit seriously ill children at home. Police say they have no plans to exhume the bodies of 6 of the 18 who are understood to have been buried in order to look for evidence of overdoses, but they've not ruled out the possibility. Officers have also said they won't, for the time being, extend their investigation to Great Ormond Street Hospital in London, where the nurse was seconded in 1994 for 6 months of specialist paediatric training. The head of the community trust, who suspended the nurse last September over an unrelated matter, was also guarded, refusing to give details as to why she's still off work.
The police investigation, I believe they were waiting for further information so they could sit with all the details shared with the families concerned, but we were pushed into a situation where something appeared, as you were quite aware, in the newspapers this morning, which, if I was in the family's position out there, I would be extremely distressed. And I'm only delighted that last night we could actually visit those families concerned and reassure them and offer them support and ongoing help. And that's, as I said, been offered long term.
She now faces interim suspension from the nursing register while the investigation's carried out. She's not been questioned, arrested or charged with any crime, and police have not yet questioned the parents of any of the children who died. The police have emphasised they're only in the early stages of their investigation. It seems parents may face a long wait for the answers they want.
Matthew Hill, and we'll be hearing from him again in a moment. But I'm joined now by Mark Jones, who's a primary care policy advisor for the RCN, and also by Sue Norman from the UK Centre for Counsel for Nursing. Also by David Crampton, whose son survived Beverly Allitt's administrations, and also by Anne Alexander, who was a solicitor who acted for the families of the victims in the Beverly Allitt case. First of all, David Crampton, we don't know yet whether charges were brought or not, but presumably this case brings back echoes of what was a terrible time for many families in the Beverly Allitt case.
Yes, I mean, it was a very traumatic time for our family. Our child was taken into hospital for best care, and unfortunately Beverly Allitt committed a crime against him, and we're very fortunate that he's well and survived that. But clearly, things such as this bring back traumatic memories of that period.
Presumably as a parent who had a child in the care of the medical profession, you were putting your complete trust and faith in them.
Absolutely, and we still would. One mustn't allow this to affect the rest of one's life, but clearly we're much more careful now about how we talk to the medical profession, but one has to remember this is a very small percentage of the medical profession.
Anne Alexander, parents only knew last night of what was going on. I mean, after the Beverly Allitt case, are you surprised that this was left so much to the last minute?
I'm very shocked that it was left to the last minute. I think that parents have the right to know. Clearly this has been going on for some time, and I think that the parents should have been informed